Hey YouTube. So for today's job, I'm going to be changing the brake rotors or calipers on a 2014 Subaru WRX STi. I'm going to show you the vehicle and what I've done so far, which is not a lot. Just take the wheel off, show you the new rotors and the old rotors. This vehicle's got about 35,000 miles on it, but it's also 7 years old, so the rotors do have, and I also drive it kind of hard, so the rotors do have some wear on them, and I think it's time for a change. So I'll show you the rotors and how to do this job. It's not super difficult. It shouldn't take more than maybe an hour per side. So let's take a look. So this is where we are so far. Only thing I've done is remove the wheel and got the car up on jacks. One thing that is maybe different for my car, and if you have a Subaru, maybe this isn't the case, but I actually have spacers on my wheels. So these are wheel spacers that push the wheels out. That gives it a kind of a more flush look, so the wheels are much more flush to the car. I've got them on the back, so you can kind of see that the wheels stick out a little bit further than they would do. Let me show you on the side that does have the wheel back on again, and you can see, you know, it pushes the wheels out to be more flush with the bodywork, so they're not inside. Does mean that if you've got your car lowered, they'll more likely hit the wheel arches. But I prefer the look of this. Let's take a look at the one. So I've actually taken one off and I've already changed it. And so this is the stock STi brake caliper. You may know this, but they are different from WRX. So if you have an STi or you have a WRX, the cars look very similar, but they are actually, there are certain things that are different. The one thing that everybody knows is that the engine in the STi is cranked up in boost and has a bigger intercooler. But maybe some people don't realize this, but it's actually a completely different wheel hub. And so the wheel hubs are different. That means that the brake disc bolt pattern and wheel pattern is different. So if you've got wheels for an STi, they don't fit on a WRX, and vice versa. So these are the new ones. These are what did the pizza box say? StopTech discs. So these are what I'm putting on, and this is what's coming off. So you can see the bit of a difference in the way they look. They are supposed to give better brake performance, but we'll find out. As I said, I've already taken one off, so you can see that you need to use these little bolts here. You can probably just find these at Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever. I actually don't know what size they are, but I happen to have some that look like they would work, and they do. So the reason you need these is because there is nothing holding the caliper to the car. The only thing holding it on is the wheel. So if you remove the wheel, and the caliper, I should say, and if you remove the wheel and the caliper, so if you remove the caliper, that's also holding it on. But if you remove the caliper and you remove the wheel, there's nothing holding this on. So this is actually what you're going to do is you're going to push down on these screws, and it's going to push the caliper, the disc or rotor outwards. And so when we go back to the car, you'll see this. You see this big lug in the center. Don't touch it. You don't need to take that off. You just need to remove the wheel, and then take two bolts from the back of the caliper, move the caliper off to the side, suspend it using like a metal coat hanger or rope or whatever, and the whole thing will come off. So let me show you. This isn't going to take too long. We can jump straight in. So the next step is just removing that wheel spacer. This is specific to my car, so I won't go over it too much. But essentially you want to just remove all of these bolts and remove this, and that actually takes you down to the disc itself. So this is what we're going to remove. Those are the two holes that I showed you earlier that will help us pull this off. So there's nothing holding this on at this point except for this. So let's take a quick look behind the caliper so we can take a look at those bolts. This is going to be a bit fiddly while I swing the camera around and try and show you. So I have a light back here. First bolt is here, and of course my light isn't really in the right spot. There we go. Okay. First one is here. This is the lower bolt, and then the second one is up here. This is the higher one. So two pretty big bolts. We're going to remove those, and the caliper will just come off. These bolts are pretty difficult to remove. At least there is a danger that they can seize up and strip. The bolts themselves can end up being shredded. So be very careful taking them off. It's just basically means it's just got to do it slowly and use plenty of PB blaster or something similar. But let's get going on that. Okay, so I'm going to use a 19mm socket and a wrench with a small extension on it just to get this top one off. The extension just helps because there is a large suspension bolt right behind it. And this gives you a lot more clearance. You might be able to tell I've got the metal coat hanger thing hanging here so that when I'm ready, we can hang the brake caliper. So we don't want to just have it dangling using only the hydraulic hose if we can help it. So this will mean that I can get it out of the way. I've already loosened the bottom one. I've also got a 19mm ratcheting wrench. There we go. Yeah, this can help as well. The ratcheting wrench. I put PB blaster on these last night so that I hoped that these wouldn't seize up. Because as I mentioned, we have to be careful with these bolts. I have had issues where they've stripped. And in fact, these are actually not the original bolts from the car. I threaded brake pads a few months ago. And at that time I did not change the discs, but these are new ones with anti-seize on them. So that's the top one. The bottom one is already finger loose, kind of. I need the ratchet. I always have to use like my right hand to try and figure out, so we want to go, nope, not that way, the other way. Okay, so before I actually take this off, the other thing I'm going to do is remove the brake pads. That'll make it a little bit easier to get this whole thing off. So in order to remove the brake pads, I'm going to remove these pin holders here with a pair of pliers, and then carefully push out these pins. I'm going to have to put PB blaster on those as well, so that they slide back, and then pull them out, take this off, and then remove the brake pads, and that should make getting the caliper off easier. Okay, just get these pins out. I think they're called cotter pins, I think. They're pretty dirty, covered in all sorts of stuff. I'm going to try and use a pushing tool to push these out without damaging the pins. This is kind of tricky because it's easier for the tool to slide off. You can do this with a screwdriver, but you are likely to have issues. Okay, that's one.
Okay. Just gonna pull these out with a pair of pliers. Okay, I've got some grips on these things. I'm gonna wiggle it backwards and forwards and then pull the pin out from the back. There you go, there's the pin with a pair of grips on it, and there's the nipple end that I was hammering on to push these out. I'm gonna clean those up a little bit because they get covered in brake dust, and that makes it harder for them to slide in and out. So I'll grease them up before I put them back in again. This one's coming out a little bit easier. Okay, I'll put this down, try and remember which way around it goes. Oops. Okay, so the next bit, I should be able to actually pull these pads out. Of course, not very easily, as you can guess. All right, gonna have to get some pulling tool to do that. But then once we've done that, we've still got that one bolt on the bottom to remove the one 19mm bolt holding the whole assembly on. And start working on that. And then just try and pull these off. Because these calipers are, because the rotor is old, there is a lip here, which gives an indication of how much material has been rubbed off for the brake pad. So because you've got this lip around the outside that won't be there on the new one, it's actually hard to pull these off. But let me go and get some tool to help with that. So I took the second bolt off the back, and now I'm just going to try it. And now you can see that this is free to move. There's nothing holding this on now. And I'm just going to try and push this. Oh, there we go. That actually was pretty easy. So the back brake pad stayed in. The front one fell out. I'm going to put that off to the side for now. Now this is the bit where we need to hang this. So I'm going to put the wire coat hanger through here. It's shredding my rubber gloves here. All right, so there we go. So that's hung out of the way. Okay, so now there's nothing holding this on but rust and old age. But so if you see this actually looks like it won't come off. But there's literally nothing holding it on except for a bit of rust on the back. So this is the bit where we're going to put our two nuts through here. Probably going to change my gloves because these are destroyed. Put two nuts in there, and then that's going to push this outwards. So let's do that bit now. I'm going to put some PB Blaster into the little hole here. See if that helps a little bit. I'm not really going to give it much time, so probably won't help much. But I'm going to put these bolts in here. These should, if you've got the right size, these should screw in without too much resistance. Now there is going to be a bunch of rust in here, so it's not going to work with just your fingers, but you shouldn't really have too much resistance, because if you do, if it gets harder and harder and harder, it means you've got the wrong thread size. So it should be difficult slightly because of all the rust in there, but it shouldn't get harder and harder and harder. Okay, so I'm gonna go on either side here. I did this on the other side, and I basically had to push these all the way through. But I'm going to try to do just a little bit on one side and then a little bit on the other side, to try and even it out so that this thing is being pushed uniformly towards me from behind. But what this is doing is it's pushing the bolts against the hub at the back, the hub assembly at the back, which is pushing the disc forward. Eventually the disc will just drop off. Can't really see any movement at this point, but trust me, it's going. There we go. So that was it. So it just broke free. See, there's a lot of rust just falling out here. There we go. Okay, so caliper off. I'm going to clean up the inside of this a little bit. Slots on the new caliper, and that's going to be pretty much it. But you can see it's a lot of rust in here. But new not new caliper, I keep saying caliper, sorry, new rotor or disc is going to go onto this. Then we're just going to do the same thing in reverse. Put these bolts back on. If they are the stock bolts that you have, you might want to consider changing these, getting some new ones, and making sure you put some anti-seize stuff on them so they don't rust to the inside of your caliper, causing you a big headache. I have cleaned up these pins, and you can see the little holes where the cotter pins go in. So we're just gonna have to be mindful of where those little holes end up when we put this thing back together again, because we want it to be kind of aligned in that way. These pins will go in any direction, so you want to make sure the pin is accessible, pinhole is accessible. So I polished these up just a little bit, so they were black when they came out, and then they're going to be kind of nice shiny silver when they go back in again. But that's it. I'm going to go and get my cleaning tool, wire brush this off, and then put the new rotor on. All right, so let's get this shiny new disc onto the hub. I'm going to use my wheel spacer to hold it on. So I can do that. Then it's just going to be a case of putting the caliper back on, using those 2 bolts, putting the brake pads back in. I suspect it's going to get a little bit tricky when I do that bit, because the brake pads are relatively new, which means that they've got plenty of life left in them, and I'm going to have to kind of use a clamp to clamp the so the pistons inside the brake caliper, they're going to need to be pushed back in again using a clamp. So carefully compressing all of the brake fluid in the system, so that the brake pads are as far back as they can be. Otherwise they just will not fit over this brand new. Oh, that's always an issue, right? When you do brake pads, is you have this issue where the old pads come out no problem, and then the new pads go on and it just won't fit over the disc because there's so much more material on them, right? So one of these, I can't remember what size these bolts are. It's not that one, maybe this one. I don't need to do this like properly tight, just enough to hold the disc in place. I'll tighten them up to spec later on. So these will obviously be tightened to the same spec that you would tighten your lug nuts on, which for a WRX STi is 75 foot-pounds of torque. So I'll put 75 foot-pounds on these later on. And you don't want to over tighten them, because that can actually cause warping of the brake disc itself, so we don't want that. So we're going to try and push this back in again, and then put the other brake pad back in, remove the coat hanger, and then slide this back on again. So that's going to be my next step. So once you've pushed the back brake pad in using some sort of clamp, so I used this clamp, just be careful with it, because it's going to put a lot of pressure on one section of the brake pad and you don't want to crack it. So ideally you should put a plate over it to spread the force around. But you push that, put that pad in as far back as you can. Push it all the way back by clamping here. Then for the 2 pistons here, I'm going to actually pull these back in by hand. So I can actually just grab them and pull them back in as much as I can. And that pushes the brake fluid somewhere else in the system. Okay, now we should be able to actually see if we can get this pad back in. Of course, this is the bit that, in my mind, is just the trickiest bit, but there we go. It wasn't too bad. I think I'm going to be able to get the pad in. Maybe I'm going to need to hammer it a little bit. But at this point now, I think it's a good time to put these bolts back in the back of the the caliper to hold it in place. Alright, I'm gonna have to get a light. I can't see a thing back there. So I've put the 2 bolts back in and just ratcheting those down. So now the top bolt and the bottom bolt are at least partially in place, so this thing can't move around. Next step is just gonna be to get the pads in. So we're gonna gently just tap them in. Perfect. Want to get it so that this pin is going to be able to slide in nice and easy. So the pin's got to go in from the back, and the 2 holes have to be pointing kind of outwards. And this is definitely going to be a job for probably putting in the hammer, because remember the back pads I didn't even move, so they should just slide in nice and easy. We want to be able to see that little nipple part of the pin sticking all the way out, like we did before. So there we go, it's out. The cotter pin should actually slide into position now. If I've lined it up right, I can just about see the hole. Great. If you can't see the hole, then you've probably not pushed the pins in far enough. Okay, so I've got the hole lined up, this hole lined up outwards. Pin is sticking out. Little cotter pin slides over. So that's it, pretty much. Brake pads are back in. Caliper is in place. Disc is on. Now it's just a case of tidying everything up and tightening up on all the bolts. So 75 foot-pounds on these. I don't know what the torque on the back ones is, but just again, be careful. Make sure you got some anti-seize on the one on the bottom that seems to get most of the exposure to the weather. Can be a bit more difficult, but don't try. Try the best you can not strip it. But that's it. Hopefully this has been useful, and I'll see you guys again soon.